Let's get spooky. This is our Station Boo, where we explore the dark and mysterious corners of the world of horror, and we know that you are dying to listen.
Welcome to the Spooky and Kooky podcast of Earth Station Boo, where we talk all things horror. Introducing our haunted host with the most, we have Lisa.
Hello.
We have Karen.
What's up, my horrorholics?
And I am Shannon, and today we are going to be talking about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original one from 1974. So, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 1974, the birth of slasher films. Let's get into this. Who wants to start with their initial thoughts?
Okay, so this movie was touted as like the goriest movie ever. Then you rewatch it and you're like, this isn't gory. There's not even an ounce of blood in there.
Well, what blood it was in there was actually real blood.
Okay, but still, it wasn't gory. It was touted as the goriest movie and was banned in several like countries. But when you rewatch it, you're like, that's not gory. Like as a kid,
Yeah.
I remember being afraid of it, but then I rewatched it. I was like, that's not gory. But it's still a good movie because it had, it has like some of my favorite elements in it. Like I love the whole based on true events when it's not really a true story, but takes pieces of real life and puts it into the movie.
We'll dive into that part.
But yeah, that's my initial thoughts. Is like it's a good movie, but it's not the goriest. Yeah. I don't understand how they, how it was dubbed the goriest.
Yeah. Lisa?
Okay, well, my initial thoughts are I love the movie. I love the atmosphere. It makes you feel really alone. It's better if you watch it in the theater, but it's definitely not the goriest movie, but back in the 70s, it would be considered the most goriest movie because that's just how they went with the bones and the blood and all that kind of stuff. It was whatever, but I liked it. I like it way better than some of the other ones, so
yeah,
I can watch it at least once a year.
Yeah, it's a film I actually think watch it usually once a year because it is such a good film. I enjoy it just for its storytelling. I think actually storytelling wise, it's pretty well done. It's enjoyable to watch. There's all sorts of fun things, aspects to it. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I enjoy it. I like it. Even with its lack of blood for a slasher film, I think I don't know. I think it does a pretty good being gory without a lot of gore, if that makes sense. But Karen, you mentioned the very beginning where they're like, this story is based off of true events, blah, 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 and how it's not actually real true events, but it takes influence from real things that have happened.
Yeah, because I think this is like one of the first movies that had introduced the whole, this movie is based on true events.
Yeah. It started with, well, I mean, you have the director whose whole thought was basically a modern retelling of Hansel and Gretel. Cool idea, and you can definitely see the influence of that story frame, that fairy tale. You can see how it influences the film and the path that film takes. But then you have the fact that this was also based off of two serial killers. You have Ed Gein, and then you also have Elmer Wayne Henley, both of which had been big just before this movie got made. So what are your guys' thoughts on all that? Lisa, you want to start us?
Yeah, first it's a little exaggerated, but uh, I guess for me, it kind of put it a little bit more in perspective of doing your research. But it's really cool because it actually made me do more research on both of those guys. And I used to live in Texas for a while. And yeah, definitely. There's a lot more weirdos over there. No offense, Texas, but I lived in Waco. So that should tell you, yeah, that should tell you something. Um, yeah, there are a couple horror stories that are like based on true events. Like I could name off a few, but I like the fact that even though it's not all the way, it gives you a nice round thing so you can go, oh, I want to find out about this. So I kind of, I don't really have a problem with that much. Makes people like want to learn something, even if it's horrifying.
Yeah. Karen, how about you?
I mean, knowing that it's based off of true events, it makes you
Air
want to
quotes in there.
Yeah.
it makes you want to like do research on said true events. But then you research Ed Gein and Henley, and you're like, maybe we didn't need to have to base this on true events. But those two men are pretty much, just evil upon evil. I mean, you have
Yeah.
Ed Gein who went and robbed graves and then dismembered women and made them into suits, lampshades, belts,
Yep.
and Henley who lured young boys to their demise. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was part of a trio though. So it's kind
Yeah,
of
he
like
was.
you see that trio in the family,
Mm-hmm.
but who's actually luring anybody? Because they're not really luring people into their traps.
No, everybody just walked in all willy-nilly.
I
But
know, right?
and it is like, so who are you really luring? Are you just luring people? Like if they didn't walk into your house all willy nilly, are you luring people into your traps? How are you luring them into your traps? You're not. Number one, none of them are handsome or
No.
charismatic enough to like be luring people into said traps. Okay.
I mean, you have to think that there had to have been some incest going on for quite some time.
Oh, just a little bit.
Just
I
a
mean, just a
smidgen.
little bit. But at the same time, how you gonna get fresh meat for your produce stand when you're not luring people into your if you're not
Weird.
Sweeney Todd and Mrs. Lovett, who both have the charisma and the looks to lure people.
Well, they
You
they
have
did they did kind of lure because of the gas station.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, true, but there's only one old dude that's there,
Yeah.
and
Well, that's
who's
because the hitchhiker guy just keeps wandering off all willy-nilly.
Yeah.
you mean his brother? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, for the longest time, I thought the older one was dad, but then to come to find out, no, they're brothers.
Mm-hmm.
Then you're like, oh, he took the fatherly role here. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyways,
But yeah,
so based off of true events.
yeah, based off of true events. As we circle back to what we were originally talking about.
I don't know who's worse out of the two, Ed Gein or Henley.
They're both horrible.
Yeah. Both horrible.
Like if you really think about it, if you believe in hell and you believe in like Dante's Inferno, the 9 levels, they're going to the same level. So
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
but to be perfectly honest, you have to think about like just media as a whole during that time frame. You had the police action in Vietnam. You had all sorts of other like serial killers and other things that were being highlighted on the news, and they were being highlighted in such realistic and violent ways. Like they weren't censoring the way that they censor now. And
Whoa,
so
yeah.
and so I think that this film, by using those two as examples, or as inspiration for their quote unquote bad guys in the film, I think really speaks to what was happening in that era when films were being made. Leatherface was the real character that really showed the influence of both of those guys. So let's start talking about Leatherface as a character. What are our thoughts? How are we feeling about Leatherface?
I mean, he was first off, in different masks, he acts different ways.
Yeah.
Yes.
He's not like one note.
Yeah, he's
Like
got the three masks.
The mask changes him, it's like he has to portray himself through that mask.
Yeah, he's got three. He has the murder mask, he has the mother mask, and then he has the pretty lady.
In which is very interesting that, every time he puts on the mask, it changes him. Like he has some sort of DID or multiple personality disorder, but it's the mask itself that, changes that personality. Even though he is the silent type, he was able to emote his emotions through said masks.
Yeah.
So that made him a very, unique character.
Yeah.
Which also led to more big brooding killers for the slasher films.
Oh yeah. Yeah, the influence of Leatherface and future bad guys in films, like you can tell that Michael Myers and Jason Voorhees both took notes, and they're like, "Oh, slow, but yet I can still gain up on them. Got it. Oh, just use a sharp object to tear them apart. Got it. Be quiet. Got it. Like, wear a mask. Got it." Like,
yeah, exactly.
Like they took the checkpoints and like, all right, we're checking off all the things. We're doing it different, but we're checking off all the things.
Yeah, because unlike the other big bad monsters, Leatherface actually ran. He's like, I'm gonna get you.
Yeah,
I like you and I want you.
I mean, he did have to run awkwardly because he actually did run faster and he had longer legs than the heroine of the story, or our queen of that film. So there's scenes where you can see him like tearing apart at like trees with the chainsaw, and it's so that way he wouldn't catch up to her, so she would be able to create some distance between them, which I thought that was interesting. So Lisa, what do you think about Leatherface?
Honestly, I think, I agree about the three masks, the three different personalities, which is really kind of cool. Now that I'm older and I watched it again, I noticed it a lot more. Also, I noticed that I think he's a little, I guess because of all the inbreeding, I'll say.
Yeah.
He is, I think he might have some kind of mental disorder, like he's a childlike. So he puts on the mask and that turns into whatever character that he has to portray at the moment. So I felt a little sympathetic for him because he couldn't help himself. But then again, I don't think he could think through all his actions. He just runs on his emotions in the mask. I think that's what makes him more terrifying, because he just like charges through and doesn't think about anything else.
Well, I mean, you
if
have
that
to think.
Makes any sense.
Yeah, no, it does. I mean, he definitely plays off of not being completely mentally capable of making his own decisions. And probably like, anything else that has more of a simple brain processing type deal, it was very much a strangers come to the door, you take them out, that kind of thing, where it's like, outsiders are going to tear our family apart. And there's that manipulation in there, to where basically he more or less was trained to be what he is. So, and it's, I mean, you don't even have to be simple-minded in order for that to be the case. You can still have a pretty decent brain and still be brainwashed into thinking certain ways, having certain expectations, and
exactly.
But the thing is, I don't think he was brainwashed. More of being more reliant on what they have because the butcher house or the slaughterhouse closed down. So,
well, what I'm saying is like he was brought up in a family where like this is how you do things. Like if somebody comes to the house, you take them out because they're going to tear apart our family because we don't do things the right way. I think it's things like that where it's not necessarily brainwashing, because brainwashing means you had a different thought process. But he was brought up to live a certain lifestyle and to lived a certain way. And so he doesn't know that what he's doing is wrong.
Right.
Because he was taught that that was the right thing to do. So that's what I was trying to express. But yeah, Lisa, I agree. Like you have to have, there's like almost empathy or sympathy that you have for him as a character, because you know, like he doesn't really know what he's doing is wrong.
Yeah.
You know, there is that childlike mentality to him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he does have that. So it's like,
so when it comes to this film, what do we think about the story that it is telling? Like, how do we feel about the core group of young adults who ended up getting slaughtered? Lisa?
Okay. The first two, this is going to sound so callous, but the way they were, I didn't notice this until I watched it again this week. The way they were talking about her brother, the one that was in the wheelchair, how he should be, yes, how he should be shot when they were going to sneak down to the lake, because he was such a pain because he had the wheelchair.
Yeah,
I was like, me and Chris, we were like, yeah, they deserve to get it. And they were just, I didn't really like those two that much because they just didn't care. They were just rude and obnoxious. And
yeah.
now the brother and sister, I kind of feel that they were just victims of circumstances because they had no choice, and they were more like the helpless. Like you were saying, they were trying to do the Hansel and Gretel when they came upon the witch's house.
Yeah.
They weren't really going into the house, unlike the first couple. So, you know, the first couple deserve to get slaughtered. Sorry, guys, but this just proves that if you're rude and you don't mind your manners, this is what happens. Don't be rude. Don't walk into people's house uninvited. You never know what you might find. It's not gingerbread.
True. Karen, what do you think about the group?
I mean, the group had their dynamics. They weren't likable or hateable at the same time. I mean, yeah, you're going on a trip to make sure your grandfather's grave was not, vandalized. Okay, you be more a little bit accommodating to your brother that you dragged across Texas. Okay, you knew he's in the wheelchair. Be a little bit mindful of him. Yeah, he's acting like an ass, but I would act like an ass too. You taking me in this damn van with no air conditioner across the state of Texas to make sure granddad's graves is okay. All right, I understand that. And then we're gonna go wander out to our old homestead. You just gonna leave me by myself?
Not handicapped accessible.
That's not even handicap accessible. Yeah. So what am I supposed to do? Like, just sit here while y'all go off and do your thing? So yeah, when the slaughtering began, I was like, it's kind of like watching, cows and pigs get slaughtered in a slaughterhouse, which technically that's what Leatherface was doing. He was slaughtering them because they were meat.
Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, of course, old girl, the best friend, Peggy, whatever her name is. Hold on one second. Pam. I'm like, you ain't gonna fight back harder to get away from him?
Oh, yeah, right?
You deserve that. I mean, you're just like, I'm like, no. I mean, I know this is the 70s, but stranger danger. Stranger danger. If you gonna pick me up, I don't know you. I don't know you, sir. I'll be fighting tooth and nail to get away from you.
Yep.
That was the most feeble attempt to get away.
It was. It was.
Yeah, it was.
I mean, the slaughtering, it had to happen because they seen too much.
Yep. Yep.
And poor Frank.
Right?
I know, right?
Just in a wheelchair, going look for his friends with his sister, and then he gets got. I'm like, oh no, y'all shouldn't have brought him. Y'all should have left him home. He was just fodder. That's what he was. He was just fodder.
Yep. The second that you turn on the movie and you see there's a guy in a wheelchair, you just know he's going to be one of the ones who gets got. Like, you just do, especially when he is kind of an asshole and everything. But honestly, none of those characters were like really characters that you were like really trying to root for until Sally at the end. But even with Sally, like for a good portion of the movie, you're like, why are you being such a jerk? Like, what is the point? Yeah, like what was the point of being so mean? Like,
exactly.
It didn't solve anything. So I think this is kind of like a lot of the characters in horror films that get killed. You either like are like, what? Why are you killing them? They shouldn't have been killed at all. Or you're like, I'm not too sad. I'm not heartbroken that character passed away.
I mean, yeah, I wasn't heartbroken when any of the characters passed away. I really wasn't.
No.
I mean,
I wasn't.
I felt sad for Frank because he went out like, he could go out fighting. I mean, he was in a wheelchair and ended up right into the chainsaw. I'm like, well, damn.
Well,
sorry, Frank.
First of all, I thought they were really stupid for picking up that hitchhiker.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Like, why? Especially the way he was acting on the road. Why would you do that?
I don't get.
I mean, the thing is, it's the 70s, okay? I mean, people in the 70s and 80s did some strange things. I mean, I guess with like a group of people in a van, you'd be okay, right?
I mean, Peggy even said, "Don't pick him up. He's crazy."
Exactly. The first girl that died.
Yeah, the first girl.
You mean Pam?
Pam. Pam. Sorry.
Pam, that's right.
But like even she said, she's like, "Don't pick him up. He's crazy looking." And what do? They
pick him up.
They pick him up.
And he was crazy in the car too. You're like,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The only person that was kind of like, paying attention to him was Frank.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep.
Poor Frank.
Poor Frank.
Poor Frank. So what do we think about the family? So we got the hitchhiker, we've got the old man, we have Leatherface, and then we have the grandfather.
The family itself, there's been theories that maybe Leatherface was a Vietnam vet. And that's the reason why, he is the way he is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's plausible. It's very plausible because this is takes place after Vietnam.
Yeah.
So it'd be very plausible if he was a Vietnam vet that just snapped and is just basically doing, what he could to keep his family safe.
Yeah.
And fed.
True.
And poor grandpa can't even hold a hammer anymore, even though they want him to hold a hammer to hit poor Sally in the head, and he can't because he's old and feeble. And then you have,
but he was the best killer of the group.
No, he was not.
He is too.
Grandpa was not. It is proven when he couldn't do it that he was no longer the best killer. Then you have the hitchhiker, crazy, and then you have the older brother, the attendant of the gas station, who was semi-normal.
Oh my God! Yeah.
I mean, he was the only one that could run a gas station.
True.
Yeah.
I wouldn't leave it to the hitchhiker.
Oh no.
No.
And Leatherface is just there to procure meat for this gas station and for the family.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be suck if you're just driving through Texas, sees a little gas station, you're like, oh, I need some, some vittles, and you're just eating people, not even knowing it. But
I mean, you never know. You never know. Is that pork or is it quote unquote pork?
Yeah, long pork.
But
Yeah.
the family dynamic, it's interesting. It really
Mm-hmm.
is because
Yeah.
each of them have their own role to play.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
I mean, I think the hitchhiker kind of sort of lures them into some sort of something because he did mark their van.
Yeah,
Yeah. I think he gets them to the gas station for the old
right.
man. Obviously, the old man is the brains of the outfit. Like, he's the one who can kind of be like, okay, here's what we need to do to get things done. Grandfather, I think, probably was that back in the day
Hmm.
when he was actually,
Reliable.
cognizant and not just a rotting husk. And then you have the hitchhiker who just is a crazy man who's literally a loose cannon doing whatever he wants. You can tell, like, just the way that the old man talks to him and like treats him, that they clash
Yeah,
constantly. And then you have Leatherface, who's been kind of put into what would have been during that era the female role of the household. So he cooked, he cleaned, he was the homemaker.
It's like the old man is the father figure
Mm-hmm.
hmm,
since he's the oldest one. The hitchhiker is the young brother, is the
hmm,
youngest, and then you have Leatherface as the middle child.
yep.
Mm-hmm.
The young one wants to could almost get away with stuff, but the older one's like, no, no. And poor
Yep.
Leatherface is in the middle, like, I'm just gonna cook.
Oh,
I want to cook dinner.
Right? You
yeah,
guys want some sausage? I can make some sausage.
yeah.
Lisa, what about you? What do you think about that family dynamic?
Yeah. It was kind of interesting to hear them arguing at the table.
Yeah.
You're just the cook. Shut up. You're just the cook. That was kind of. They still have honor for their grandfather. If the grandfather, even though he's not the head anymore, obviously he's just an honorable head.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I definitely think the hitchhiker, he does lure them in somehow and marks the cars. He's definitely a loose cannon. It was kind of interesting when she was screaming at the table and he's making faces at her and just being like a little kid in that way, going yeah, yeah, and
Yeah,
laughing
the
at her pain
taunting.
and stuff. The whole taunting thing, and then of course the older brother is telling him to shut up, and
Mm-hmm.
they're just he's trying to calm her down, saying it's okay, it's okay. So he's kind of nurturing her while Leatherface is going around with the mask, going, "Come on," kind of doting on everybody and trying to be the mama, quote
Mm-hmm.
unquote, air quotes.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a very interesting dynamic because you wouldn't think that Leatherface would be a feminine figure, but kind of sort of is when the
Yeah.
family's all together.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
because
mean,
you look at the two masks he wears like the
Yeah,
mother mask and the lady
and
mask. So
yeah, exactly.
mhm. I mean, even his killer mask has more feminine features
Mhm.
than masculine.
Right.
yeah, which is probably more attributed to Ed Gein
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
because of the fact that he was kind of obsessed with his mother, but he
Yeah.
also hated his mother,
Like
and
most
Yeah.
serial killers.
Yep.
most of the graves he dug up were older women. So it makes a lot of sense
Yeah.
that his killer mask would be kind of feminine.
So, what do you guys think about like the storytelling and the special effects, like just the movie production as a whole?
As a whole, it's pretty good because of the fact that if you notice, there's no musical score.
No, there's
It's a
not.
straight
Right.
natural
Yes.
sound,
Mm-hmm.
which is eerie because you
Very
always
eerie.
expect a musical score in every movie you watch, but this one has none, and you're like kind of uneased.
Mm-hmm.
But then again,
Exactly.
it puts you in that movie because you're like, okay, I'm walking around, walking around, walking around. Yeah, okay. Um, so no soundtrack makes it even better because it puts you in that position. The camera angles that they use, the camera cuts,
Mm-hmm.
brilliant, brilliant.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh yeah.
Especially like how they got the camera to go underneath certain areas, like like going underneath a swing or doing different shots. For that time, amazing. There, you didn't have that much graphics when it came to the horror part of it, like the gore part of it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, some of them were like accidents that happened on set. Like the poor boy who
Yes.
got hit in the head. He actually got hit in the head with a hammer.
Yeah.
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 That was actual
Or
blood.
or
That was actually
Sally.
bird.
Or Sally, when she was actually running through the brush, all the cuts and scrapes that she got were actually real cuts and scrapes that she got. So it was real blood and everything that was on her when she was coming through there.
Yeah, Marilyn was such a trooper for that.
She was.
Yeah, you have the acting portion. Some of it you're kind of like, you could tell these aren't like really, really true actors. But then you hear the behind the scenes, like Marilyn being strapped to the chair, screaming over and over again for that whole scene. I think they had to do that. They did that like 23 hours of shot of her screaming and keeping up that energy. And I'm like, that's a goat right there. I would have like lost that energy after the third, fourth hour of redoing that scene.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and they had to do it because John couldn't go through the makeup process to have that old person face. Yeah. Which I don't blame him. Like 110 degrees in Texas filming this.
Yeah. No. Yeah. And he was 21 and skinny when he did that.
They used actual glue for his mask. And yeah, that was not a good thing. And see, the practical effects, they were decent for their time period.
Yeah.
But Marilyn, man, Sally, especially with that scene where, the old man's hitting her with the broom. I'm like, you're really not hitting her with the broom, man. They had to do that take for like so many times until she actually said, hey, man, listen, hit me with the damn broom. Just hit me. Hit me. Because she even had to say it to him. It's like, hey, just hit me. I think they did like 20 shots.
Yeah, there was a bunch of shots.
Yeah.
Until she finally said, hit me. Just hit me.
Yeah, there was a lot of film that was not used because they had to like reshoot so many different things.
Right.
The fact that they got John Lorquette.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lorquette,
As the narrator, he narrates almost every single one of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah, he does.
And it's amazing.
But hey, when you're getting paid in weed.
Yeah.
I mean, for the first movie, yeah, he probably got paid after that,
Oh yeah. Probably for like the other stuff. But yeah, that the first one that we're talking about, he got paid in weed.
Yeah. I mean, it's great. You're like, hey, we need somebody to narrate. And the only thing he does like narration, that those 2 sentences.
Yep.
This story is based on true events. You're like, wow, that's it? That's all you say? Okay.
Yep.
And he's been in like his narration has been in every single one of them, even the remakes. And you're like, you're only there for like 2-3 sentences. It's great.
Lisa, what about you?
Oh, well, I definitely agree that the fact that there was no soundtrack made it more visceral. And you had more of the atmosphere and you felt dusty and gross because you didn't have to, you felt like you were right there, and that calm silence was kind of unnerving. The special effects, without, of course, the things that happened to certain actors and stuff, it's pretty good. I mean, for what it was. I mean,
yeah.
I know I was told that was a very hot suit by John, that it was horrible. And the whole story and everything all together, and the way that camera angles, I love the cinematography. It was some of the best cinematography I've seen, and I still go back to that to get references and use it as a reference for mine when I do my photography outside. It's just the whole tone and the feel, and you just felt icky, which is great because you're supposed to feel icky.
Yeah, it makes you uncomfortable when there's just nothing but silence.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I think it's really interesting that the sound guy that did it, because I was on a panel at DragonCon for this, and one of the panelists was like, they had a 50th anniversary screening. They brought out all the props from the original movie, and some props that they couldn't get the original prop, they had a prop of the prop. They even had ticket sales for that time. So imagine in the 70s with the ticket sales, there's a lot of people there. They had the sound director there. And one of the sounds that he did, he will not divulge the information on how he did that sound to this day.
Yep.
But he was there, and I thought that was really interesting. She's like, "Yeah, you can also go to the house. It's a restaurant now."
Yep.
And I'm like, "Nope."
Oh, and I got one more thing. That scene where he's sucking on her finger and doing that little
Where Grandpa
dance.
sucking on her finger?
Yeah, doing that little dance. He got inspiration from John. Got inspiration from imagining that. Now this is going to creep everybody out even more, because when a baby sucks on its mom's breast and the milk starts to flow, so he made that kind of excited move, like babies make when they're breastfeeding, and that's what he was imagining when he did that scene. So, thanks a lot, John. Thanks a lot.
Just so you know, all three of us have a look of disgust on our face and are shaking our head no.
No. But then, John, you'll be happy because you've done your job by creeping us out. Yay. Thank you.
Yep. Yeah. Lisa is friends with John, and who played the grandpa in the original film. Unfortunately, because it is the 50th anniversary, he wasn't able to join us, but we might have him on at some point so he can talk about his time as a horror movie character. I honestly, like, this film isn't the most well-made horror film in all time. Are there things that like could be done better? Absolutely. But I think this film overall hit everything. Like, I think the plot and storytelling of it was done fairly well. It was a simple plot, but it was told well. The cinematography, like both of you said, like it was shot really well. There were some great, like, iconic looking scenes that you're just always going to remember. Like, Pam getting put on the hook. That is iconic. That is something that you will forever like remember, and has inspired like so many other things. Special effects wise, I think they did pretty decent, especially for like what the budget probably was at that time for a horror film like that. For being out in the middle of nowhere in Texas and that heat, there's only so much you can do with certain things, because it's either going to be too hot to do it, or it's going to dry up, or it won't work with that kind of heat. So I don't know. I think they did a really good job with what they were given to create something that is so iconic and became the inspiration for so many other things.
I mean, they had a budget of $80,000 to $140,000, which is not bad.
Yeah, no. But that's nothing compared to what movies get now, or even other movies during that time.
Get like billions.
But even what some of the movies back then were getting, there were movies who were getting $1 million budgets, and they weren't. And like what they did use their budget on probably wasn't the wisest, but filming for 23 straight hours, that's not cheap. That's a lot of film that you have to purchase and go through. But
they did it because of the fact that they didn't have the capability of filming short time, because of the rentals of the because you have to rent your equipment. It's It's not like you have a cameraman that owns his own camera. That'd be cool though. If you had a cameraman that owned his own camera, you don't have to worry about that. But you're renting equipment, you have to buy the film, and you're paying these guys peanuts. And what Bill said, because I was on a panel with him, Bill Milligan, he's like, sometimes the food table is the most expensive thing you have.
Yeah.
But you got to keep your stars fed.
But even with that being said, I've listened to a couple of the actors on different panels at different horror conventions, and they even said we didn't get food and water the way you're supposed to on set. So they weren't getting fed. Money wasn't going towards that.
Oh no, I'm gonna make sure my peoples get fed. I'm like, if that's like the most expensive thing that we have, y'all getting fed. It's the Southern
and water.
Oh yeah, and especially water.
Some water and some sweet tea. That's the Southern. Y'all getting something.
I mean, the only thing that somebody said that there was usually a good supply of was Heineken. There was always Heineken in the fridge.
No, you can't be drinking beer in the summer heat. You need water.
Exactly.
You and your Southern accent. That's excellent. Water.
But for you ladies, what makes this film iconic?
I would have to say, just the fact that they did it on a small budget and they had a great story, and it's something you can watch over and over again. And Leatherface, just like, you could tell anybody at any age and they know who Leatherface is. I went around work today and I asked, hey, do you know who Leatherface is? They all knew who he was, even if they were like 20s, 19s, 18s, everybody knows who he is. So that kind of makes this movie iconic and one of the main monsters that people know, even though he's not, well, he's a monster, but so it's just one of those movies that just will stay forever in history. So
yeah,
even if you don't see the first one, you will know who it is. So yeah, that's why.
Karen, what about you? What do you think is iconic about this film?
The fact that they made a film, a low budget film, to convey a story, with minimal practical effects, a horror story with minimal practical effects, because you can infer for what was happening. It's actually very, very, very good, because most horror stories, they want to have like the blood, they want to have like the torture porn going on, but this one, because of that it was low budget, very few practical effects, it makes it uncomfortable in a horror story. Because you have to use your imagination of what's going behind the scenes of what's happening to these people.
Right.
And you don't want to use your imagination for that.
Yep.
But it forces you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the poor girl getting hung up on that hook and then put in the freezer, and she ain't really dead because she popped up out.
Yeah. See, for me, it's things like that. There's moments in this film that you just remember, like Leatherface dancing with his chainsaw. Like, that's iconic. That's something that, like, you don't have to actually see it to know, like, oh, that's from Texas Chainsaw. Yeah, the girl on the hook. There's so many moments in the movie that are they're memorable. And so I think that's what kind of makes it an iconic film. And the fact that it does bring inspiration for so many other films going forward, and that it's the birth of the slasher era of horror, and which happens to be a lot of people's introduction to horror right now. Like, most people get introduced to it through slasher films. So I think that's I think that's what kind of makes it even more iconic is it does that. How do you ladies feel about this being the birth of slasher films? And what do you think about its impact on horror genre as a whole?
I mean, somebody had to be the first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Someone had to, like, run before they could walk, or walk before they could run, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as it for being a slasher slashies blood guts. No, there's not that much. I don't understand how they described it as, like, as Roger Ebert said, as it was a violent and gruesome and blood soaked as the title promises. What's going on? Did you watch the same film that I did, Ebert? No,
he probably covered his eyes.
But somebody had to do it first, and because they did it first, they solidified their place in horror history, because off of Leatherface, you have Jason Voorhees, you have Mike Myers, and then there's some other modern day hulking bad guys, which I saw one the other day. It was like, it took place in 2016, and he wore a mask, and he was a hulking predator who was kind of silent. He didn't talk much, but he did every once in a while. And I was like, oh, you're trying to be like Michael Myers or Jason. That's cute. But without that influence, you wouldn't have the slasher films that we have. I mean, you probably could, but they did it first.
Yeah. They definitely did it first. Yeah, without them, we probably wouldn't have The Town That Dreaded Sundown or Pieces or all those other, movies and the whole mask that made it iconic. So, like, as you said earlier, that it check off this, yes, check off this, yes. So yeah, they were the first ones to do it, and they definitely embedded themselves in history. And I probably wouldn't watch half the stuff if I hadn't seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre, because it's like, ooh, may not have been the goriest thing, but it was still good enough to make you go, I kind of want more. And also, quote, air quotes, the true story aspect of it makes people curious, and so it also goes on, so you can extend to serial killer slashers like The Town That Dreaded Sundown, or Pieces, and then you can have the ghosts, like the avenging ghosts like Jason or Michael Myers or all that. And so it just gave you different avenues for slasher movies, and yeah, it was definitely the first one that really ran with it.
Yeah, I mean, slashers.
And Sally was like the precursor to the Scream Queen, really, if you think about it. And she was the final girl. So without her, you wouldn't really have, the Halloween franchise with Jamie Lee Curtis.
Right.
Yep.
Becoming the final girl and Scream Queen.
Yep.
But 23 hours screaming straight for that one scene. Damn.
Oh, her poor voice.
Yeah, this movie created the slasher genre that we know today, because you had one central character that killed so many other characters in the film, and it gave birth to a new process on how to do horror. And so, I mean, so many of our movies, even past the slasher era, we wouldn't have if it wasn't for Texas. And so, it deserves the massive props that it has. Like Terrifier, we wouldn't have Art the Clown if we hadn't had Leatherface. So he's on a marvelous gateway.
And also you have, like, horror directors like, Wes Craven said, like, he crafted The Hills Have Eyes as a homage towards the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah.
Because they had that same line of a family and cannibalism.
Yeah. I mean, there's tons of horror movies that are based off of the like immediate influence of Texas.
Yep.
Where you watch it and you're like, they obviously are a fan of Texas Chainsaw, because you don't make a movie like that without that being your inspiration.
I mean, yeah, like Rob Zombie's A House of a Thousand Corpses.
Oh, I know, right?
Right? Exactly. So let's go ahead and wrap this up with some final thoughts. Karen, what are your final thoughts on the film? And what's your skull rating?
For something that was low budget and had it was intelligently made with bloodless horror. I actually give it a 4.5. There were some things that could have been done better, like some of the acting that could have been better. But the reason why I give it a 4.5, because I give props to some of the acting that they did do, poor Marilyn, 20 some hours doing in that chair screaming, several takes of getting hit with a broomstick. That she's a whole vibe right there. She's a whole horror last girl vibe right there.
She is.
And also a person of color survived at the end of the movie. So
yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the truck
he was
driver.
the only one. Yeah, he was the only one trying to save her too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And he survived while he was trying to save her. So I was like,
Lisa, what about you? What are your final thoughts?
Okay, my final thoughts. For a low budget, this is a low budget movie done right. Cinematography, fantastic. The minimal practical effects, but it was still foreboding enough with the silence and the quietness of the film that it just felt good. The iconicness of Leatherface. I definitely give it a 4.5. One for Marilyn, definitely for Marilyn and her poor voice.
Right.
Her 20 something hours. 2 for John, who creeps us out horribly with his analogy on his grandpa, and giving him kudos for being in that makeup forever.
Right.
Yeah. And my last final thought is, kids, don't walk into a house that you're not invited. And if you see taxidermy, it's not gingerbread. For sure.
For sure. For sure.
For sure.
Especially if you hear things coming from the house, you're like, oh, somebody lives there. Let me knock.
Yes, you knock. And if it's screaming or squealing, you don't want to walk in there. You never know what you're gonna find.
Yeah. So this movie, it's just, I'm gonna give it a 5, because it's more like a 4.99, but I'm gonna give it a 5 because even though, as I said before, does it do all the things in a movie like perfectly? No, but it comes together perfectly to be such an iconic film that then produces so much inspiration for everything else, that I kind of have to give it that 5. I have to give it the extra little bit. But it's an enjoyable film. Even the remakes of it, I don't think are as horrible as other things that have been remade. Are they perfect? No, they're not. Don't
talking about remakes. Are you talking about the sequels and then the 2003 remake?
I'm talking about anything that came after this original one.
Oh.
So any of the remakes, any of the sequels, any of that stuff, are they perfect? No, but they're still enjoyable because they're based off of this one, which is so enjoyable. And it's celebrating 50 years for a reason. This is an amazing film. So, listeners, would you have gone into the house uninvited? We really hope not, especially since I believe Texas is a stand your ground state. So don't go walking into houses unwelcomed. But tell us on our social media so we can continue the conversation. We are on Instagram. We are on TikTok, X, Threads, and our Facebook group is always bumping. So come join us. Tell us. You can also subscribe, rate us wherever you listen to podcasts, such as Apple, Google, Spotify, and we are on YouTube. So please make sure you guys are sharing, and subscribing. But ladies, where can they find you at if they want to just hang out with you? Lisa?
Oh, you can find me in Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and now TikTok, thanks to the girls. And I'm updating my YouTube, which I'll announce that a little bit later on our group and on my Facebook, when I start doing, because I'm going to start building monsters again. So you guys are probably going to want to enjoy that. So that's where you can find me.
Karen, where can they find you?
Facebook, Instagram, X, formerly known as Twitter, Threads, TikTok, and Reddit.
Groovy. And I'm Shannon. You can find me on all the things at Spilled Tea Wine Media Mind. But before we go, we want to thank you, the listener. We really do actually appreciate you guys listening to the podcast, rating us, giving thumbs up on all of our YouTube videos and everything. So please continue doing that. We really do appreciate it. Your support means the world to us. But stay spooky, our lovely little ghouls.
And this has been the Spooky and Kooky Podcast of Earth Station Boo.